The engine of my 78 F-150 hadn't even cooled down before she was tapping a manicured nail on my window, looking at my truck like it was a pile of radioactive waste that had just rolled onto her pristine planet. I hadn't even unlatched the gate yet, hadn't stepped foot on the soil that had been in the Vance family for 4 generations, and already, I was being told I didn't belong here. "Mr. Vance," she said, and the way she said my name sounded less like a greeting and more like a diagnosis. "I'm Patricia Sterling, president of the Pine Ridge Estates Association. You're in violation of Article 4, Section C regarding commercial vehicles, and Article 7 regarding unapproved historic fencing. That's a preliminary fine of $1,500, daily, effective immediately." I just sat there for a second, staring at this woman in her cream-colored pantsuit standing in the mud of the Pacific Northwest spring, holding a clipboard like a weapon. I looked past her, up the gravel driveway to the house. It was a 1925 Craftsman, cedar shingles turning silver gray, moss growing thick on the north side, the porch sagging just a little on the left. It was the place where my grandfather taught me how to read a blueprints and where my grandma taught me that blackberries taste best when you pick them yourself, scratches be damned. I'd spent 10 years as a structural engineer in Seattle, saving every dime, eating ramen and working 80-hour weeks just to buy this place back from the estate after my uncle let it go to seed, and I knew every single page of the closing documents better than I knew the back of my own hand. I rolled the window down the rest of the way and looked her dead in the eye, trying to keep the tired out of my voice. "Ma'am, I closed on this property 3 days ago. I read the deed. There are no easements, no covenants, and definitely no HOA. This is unincorporated county land. You're trespassing." She didn't even blink. She just smiled, that tight, practiced smile that doesn't reach the eyes, the kind of smile a shark gives you right before it takes a leg. "Oh, honey," she said, dropping her voice to a patronizing coo. "The association has had jurisdiction here since the subdivision expansion in 2018. Ignorance of the bylaws isn't a legal defense. You have 24 hours to remove the truck and schedule a demolition crew for that eyesore of a fence, or we'll begin legal foreclosure proceedings. Welcome to the neighborhood." She slapped a heavy envelope on my hood, turned on her heel, and walked back to a black luxury SUV that cost more than the renovation budget I'd set aside for the whole house. As she drove away, weaving carefully to avoid the potholes, I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach, the kind of feeling you get when you realize the bridge you're standing on has a hairline fracture in the support beam. That night, instead of celebrating with the bottle of bourbon I'd bought, I sat on the floor of the empty living room surrounded by boxes, reading by the light of a camping lantern. I tore open her envelope. It was terrifyingly professional. Notice of violation. Lien warning. Community standards. If I didn't know better, if I hadn't spent a decade reading contracts, I would have panicked. But I'm an engineer. I don't panic, I analyze load paths. I pulled up the county GIS maps on my hotspot connection. I pulled up the state registry of corporations. I searched for Pine Ridge Estates Association. Nothing. No charter. No tax ID. No boundaries filed with the county clerk. Legally speaking, Patricia Sterling was the president of a ghost. I called my buddy Marcus the next morning. Marcus is a contract lawyer who hates wearing suits and loves a good fight. "Caleb," he said, laughing over the speakerphone while I scraped peeling paint off the porch railing, "it's a shakedown. It's vapor. Don't pay a dime. But listen to me, these people rely on fear, not law. If she's coming at you this hard on day one, she's not just a busybody. She's running a scheme. You need to document everything. Every word, every piece of paper. Treat this like a forensic audit." He was right. 2 days later, the harassment escalated from paperwork to psychological warfare. I'd be working on the roof, replacing cedar shakes, and I'd see a drone hovering 20 feet above my head, filming me. I'd wake up to find my mailbox smashed. Then came the flyers. Bright neon orange papers taped to every telephone pole for 3 miles, warning, neighborhood blight. Unpermitted construction at Vance property reduces your home value. The neighbors, people I remembered from when I was a kid, started avoiding me. I'd wave at Mr. Henderson down the road, a man who used to give me rides on his tractor, and he'd just stare straight ahead, gripping his steering wheel like he was afraid to be seen acknowledging my existence. Patricia was isolating me. She was cutting the supply lines before laying siege. But the real turning point, the moment this stopped being annoying and started being war, happened a week later. I was in the local diner, grabbing a coffee, and I overheard the waitress talking to an older couple in the booth behind me. "It's a shame about the Millers," she whispered. "Lost their place last month. That HOA woman said they owed 40 grand in fines for their barn. They just sold it to her company for pennies on the dollar and moved to Idaho. Broken-hearted, the both of them." I froze. I turned around, apologized for interrupting, and asked, "Did you say the Millers? The folks with the blue house by the creek?" The old man nodded, looking tired. "Yep. Same thing happened to the widow Larson last year. Bullied out of her home. That Sterling woman bought it, flipped it 6 months later for double. Said the fines would go away if they just sold to her investment group." That's when the pieces clicked into place. This wasn't about fences or work trucks. This was a slow-motion heist. Patricia Sterling wasn't protecting property values, she was depressing them, manufacturing debt out of thin air to force distressed sales, buying the land through a shell company, and pocketing the profit. My 5 acres, with the timber and the creek, were worth nearly $1 million in this market, but she was trying to get it for a fraction of that by making my life a living hell. I went back to the house, and for the first time, I looked at it not as a renovation project, but as a fortress. I bought 4 high-definition cameras with audio recording. I set up motion sensors. And I created a spreadsheet, a beautiful, complex, engineer-brain spreadsheet, tracking every interaction, every threat, every fake fine. Patricia showed up again 3 days later, this time with a compliance officer, a guy built like a vending machine who just stood there cracking his knuckles while she spoke. I was ready. I had my phone in my shirt pocket, recording app open. "We're up to $14,000 in fines, Caleb," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "I hate to see a young man start his life in debt. The board met last night. We're willing to offer a solution." "I'm listening," I said, leaning against a porch column I had just reinforced, trying to look defeated. "You have to let the predator think the prey is limping. We have an acquisition partner. Sterling Horizons LLC. They're willing to buy the property as is, cover your fines, and give you, let's say, $600,000 cash. You walk away clean. No court, no liens, no stress. You can go back to the city where you belong." My blood was boiling so hot I could feel my pulse in my teeth, but I kept my voice steady. "And if I don't sell?" Her face changed. The mask slipped just a fraction. "Then I file the lien on Friday. I foreclose next month. And you leave with nothing but the shirt on your back. It's a generous offer, Caleb. Don't be stupid. This house is rotting anyway." "I'll think about it," I said, forcing myself to look at my boots. "You have 24 hours, she snapped, signaling her goon to follow her. As they drove off, I pulled my phone out and stopped the recording. I had it. Extortion. Fraud. A direct link between the harassment and the purchase offer. I sent the file to Marcus immediately. He texted back 3 minutes later, "Got her. But let's not just win. Let's burn her kingdom down." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my grandfather's old study, looking at the wall where he used to hang his hunting rifle. I realized that winning in court wouldn't be enough. If I just sued her, she'd settle, pay a fine, and move on to the next victim. She needed to be stopped, publicly and permanently. I needed to do something she never expected. She thought she was the authority here. Fine. I was going to beat her at her own game. I started digging into state property codes, reading until my eyes blurred. And there, buried in subsection 12 of the Planned Community Act, I found the weapon I needed. A loophole? No, a sledgehammer. It turns out, since there was no real HOA, the territory was open. If 51% of the deed holders in a defined geographic area petitioned the state, they could form a legitimate community association. One with real legal standing that would supersede any fake claims. I wasn't just going to sue Patricia Sterling. I was going to become the president of the neighborhood she pretended to own. The next morning, I traded my hammer for a clipboard and started walking. I went to Mr. Henderson's place first. The old tractor was parked in the yard, rusting under a tarp. When he opened the door, he looked at me with that same fear I'd seen on the road, eyes darting past my shoulder to see if Patricia's black SUV was following me. "Mr. Henderson," I said, keeping my voice low. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I know about the fines. I know about the threats. I know she told you your tractor is an eyesore and that she's going to take your land if you don't pay up." He sagged against the doorframe, a man defeated by invisible paperwork. "She says I owe $6,000, Caleb. I don't have that kind of money. My wife is sick. We were thinking of selling to her company just to make it stop." I pulled out my tablet and played the recording of Patricia from the day before, the part where she explicitly linked the fines to the buyout offer. Mr. Henderson listened, his jaw tightening, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the door handle. "That witch," he whispered. "That absolute witch. She's a fraud, sir," I said. "There is no Pine Ridge Estates Association. It's a ghost story she tells to steal houses. But we can stop her. Not just for me, but for everyone she's hurt." I laid out the plan. We formed the Vance Valley Community Trust. A real legal entity. Dues? $5 a year. Rules? Be a good neighbor. That's it. But legally, it occupies the space. It blocks her out. It took me 3 days. I went door to door, drinking bitter coffee in living rooms that smelled like potpourri and anxiety. I met Mrs. Higgins, who was terrified because Patricia told her her rose bushes were non-compliant. I met the young couple down the ridge who were packing boxes because they couldn't handle the stress. I showed them the proof. I showed them the math. And one by one, the fear turned into something useful. It turned into anger. We needed 20 signatures. I got 28. While Marcus filed the incorporation papers with the state, moving at the speed of light, I called Sarah Jenkins. Sarah was a reporter for the local channel who had a reputation for chewing up corrupt city councilmen for breakfast. I sent her the spreadsheet, the victim statements, and the audio file. She called me back in 10 minutes. "I'll be there tomorrow at dawn," she said. "Don't shave. You look more sympathetic with the stubble." The morning the story broke, the atmosphere in the valley felt electric, like the air before a thunderstorm. Sarah's segment was brutal. It opened with a drone shot of my grandfather's house, peaceful, historic, and cut to the recording of Patricia's voice threatening to take it away. Then came the interviews, Mr. Henderson wiping away a tear, the widow Larson describing how she was forced out. But the kicker was the ambush. Sarah caught Patricia coming out of her office, which turned out to be a mailbox at a shipping center. The camera zoomed in on Patricia's face as Sarah asked, "Ms. Sterling, can you explain why the Pine Ridge HOA isn't registered with the Secretary of State? Can you explain why your personal LLC buys every home you find?" Patricia shoved the camera, screamed something about private property, and scrambled into her car. It was the most satisfying 30 seconds of television I have ever seen. Patricia sued me the next day, of course. Defamation, tortious interference, emotional distress, she threw the whole legal dictionary at me. It was a desperate move, a cornered rat biting at the air. But she didn't know about the countermove. The court date was set for 2 months later. The courtroom was packed, not just with reporters, but with the neighbors. Mr. Henderson was there in his Sunday best. Mrs. Higgins brought cookies in her purse, which the bailiff had to confiscate. Patricia's lawyer was a slick city guy who tried to paint me as an anarchist destroying community standards. He talked about property values and aesthetic integrity. Then it was Marcus's turn. Marcus stood up, didn't even button his jacket, and walked over to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said. "The plaintiff claims my client disrupted the Pine Ridge HOA. That is impossible. You cannot disrupt something that does not exist. However." He paused for effect, pulling a stamped document from his briefcase. "My client is the elected president of the Vance Valley Community Trust, the only legally charter-recognized governing body for this district. And as president, he is here to countersue Ms. Sterling for racketeering, fraud, and extortion under the RICO Act." The color drained from Patricia's face so fast I thought she was going to faint. We presented the forensic accounting, the $1.2 million she'd skimmed from families over 5 years. We played the tapes. We put the victims on the stand. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. They awarded us $2.5 million in damages, enough to pay back every victim with interest, and then some. But the money wasn't the best part. The best part was walking out of that courthouse and seeing the sheriff waiting by the exit with a pair of handcuffs. The DA had been watching the civil trial, and they had seen enough. As they read Patricia her rights, she looked at me. There was no shark smile left. Just the empty, hollow look of someone who realized she was the one who didn't belong. 6 months later, the valley is quiet again. The real kind of quiet. We used the settlement money to help the Millers buy their old place back. Patricia's assets were liquidated, and we got it for a steal. We threw a block party at my place last weekend. Mr. Henderson brought his tractor over to help me pull out some stumps, and Mrs. Higgins finally taught me the secret to her blackberry pie. The Vance Valley Community Trust meets once a year. The meeting usually lasts 5 minutes. Any problems? No. Great, let's eat. Restoring this house has been the hardest work of my life. I've pulled out rot, reinforced foundations, and scraped away layers of old, toxic paint. But I realized something while I was sanding down the original oak floors in the hallway, revealing the beautiful grain that had been hidden under grime for decades. You can't just inherit a home. You have to fight for it. You have to earn it. And sometimes, the only way to protect your peace is to go to war for it. But here's the thing that still keeps me up at night, and I want to know what you guys think. We won, sure. But if I hadn't had the money for cameras, or the background in reading contracts, or a lawyer friend, I would have lost everything. Patricia would still be out there, eating families alive. How many other neighborhood associations are just one petty tyrant with a printer and a god complex, bullying people who don't know their rights?